Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Book Talk, The Power of Style with Christian Allaire. My name is Jennifer Hicks. I'm the Manager of Alumni Relations at Ryerson University, and I'm thrilled and excited about this webinar series for Ryerson alumni and friends. We can't wait to hear from our latest and greatest Ryerson alumni author. Before I introduce our speakers and pass it over to Dr. Ben Berry for a land acknowledgement, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items today. This session is being recorded, so you can rewatch it and share it with anyone. And if you have questions, please type them into Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom. You'll see the little option to submit questions, and we'll handle those at the end of the session. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce Ryerson alumnus author Christian Allaire, fashion and style writer at Vogue in New York City. Christian is First Nations Ojibwe, and he grew up on the Nipissing First Nations Reserve in Ontario. After earning his Bachelor of Journalism degree from Ryerson University in 2014, he moved to New York to begin his career as a fashion editor at Footwear News, and his freelance credits include Vogue, Elle, Mr. Porter, Hazlitt, Refinery 29, and more. Christian's latest book, which just came out this week, The Power of Style, explores how fashion and beauty are being used to reclaim cultures. As a fashion-obsessed Ojibwe teen, Christian rarely saw anyone that looked like him in the magazines or movies, and he sought out inspiration, and now he's working to change that. We're also excited today to have Dr. Ben Berry with us to moderate the book talk. Ben is a fashion educator, scholar, and academic leader who's committed to social justice in fashion education and the fashion industry. As chair of the School of Fashion at Ryerson University, Ben is leading the department through a deep transformation by embedding and prioritizing inclusion, decolonization, and sustainability in the curriculum and the culture. He's an associate professor of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and teaches courses that include fashion theory, design justice, and LGBTQS+ design studio. Ben is currently editing the forthcoming anthology, The Fashion Activist, Transforming Fashion Education and Ending Body Oppression. Ben holds a PhD from Cambridge University. Welcome, Christian and Ben, and I'll send it over to you.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with Christian as we celebrate the launch of your book and to have a conversation today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome. Before we get started, I want to recognize that the Toronto is on the dish with one spoon territory, and the dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into the treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And I think recognizing the rightful custodians of this land is really critical to the ethos of the book we're going to talk about today. During a conversation about understandings of disability, Anishinaabe elder Mona Stonefish shared, "In Indigenous societies, we do not see people for what they lack. We see people for what they have." And I think rather than uphold a hierarchy in which some bodies, some fashions, some aesthetics are deemed worthy and deemed worthy at the expense of others, Mona tells us that all offer a really desirable, worthy, and important contribution. And that is the conversation we're going to have today. when we're going to talk about your book, Christian, about reclaiming fashion and beauty away from a kind of narrow, exclusive stronghold to belonging to all of us. So I'm excited. I'm excited this book is in the world, and I'm excited to talk to you.
Hey, you too. That was a lovely intro.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I guess to begin, in the introduction, you talk about that your journey to writing this book actually began back in 2014 when you were studying journalism here at Ryerson. And I'd love to know, to start, a little bit about this journey and how studying journalism at Ryerson inspired and led you to write this book.
Yes. So I went to Ryerson and I knew I wanted to do fashion journalism from the get-go. I was so passionate about fashion and I knew I wanted to write about it, but I didn't really know in what way. So when I started really at Ryerson and meeting a lot of Indigenous people in fashion, whether it was like fellow students or designers at events, or I really started getting interested in cultural fashion because for so long I had actually like neglected that and not really even thought of it as like cool or worthy or whatever. But after I met all these really inspiring people during my studies, I really knew that I need to be writing about this stuff because nobody is covering these Indigenous designers and jewelry makers and artists who are doing amazing work, but like not being represented at all in fashion. So it really was kind of like a turning point during school that it was kind of like, okay, if no one else is going to do this, I might as well do it because, I'm passionate about this. And so it really kind of got me start thinking about my career. And that's kind of what I've done since I graduated.
I love that. And I think it's so obvious when we look at the work that you put out in the world, whether it's for Vogue, whether it's this book, that you're really profiling stories, designers, creatives that haven't been centered in the dominant fashion industry and telling those incredible stories. And I think one of the things I love so much about this book is just the diversity and variety of stories that you share, from plus size and fat identified players for cosplay to Indigenous folks and men in particular that are growing their hair long to reclaim their culture, to men and masked folks who wear incredible heels. I'd love to know how you met the people that you've profiled in this book and how you picked them to feature.
Yeah, well, it was tough narrowing it down, I'll tell you that. I need like 10,000 books. But I really started thinking I was just going to focus on Indigenous fashion, actually. But as I started researching, I was like, there's so many other cultures or minority groups who are feeling the same way I am, who feel ignored by the fashion industry or have been made to feel inferior or less beautiful. And so I was like, it would be a disservice to not include more voices than just one culture. So I decided to open it up. And with that, I kind of just let my research guide me. I didn't really have topics in mind. I kind of would just like stay up till 2 a.m. on Instagram scrolling. And through what I found and like really cool people and what they're doing, I then started to find like a very common through line, which is, like I said, a lot of people feeling inferior and now using fashion to show who they are and, say, we're here, we need to be covered, my culture is beautiful. And it was kind of surprising because from cosplayers to makeup artists, these are all really different categories, but they all have the same experiences, which was really interesting to me. So it kind of just like really shaped up naturally, which is a dream when you're doing a book. So I'm so happy that I took that approach.
What was the response like when you reached out to folks? Were they like surprised, like you want to profile me? What was that response like from them?
Yeah, because some of them don't have a lot of followers. Like I didn't think about it in that way at all. Like some of them are just really small, artists on Instagram and doing it for fun, not even as like a serious, hobby or whatever. And yeah, a lot of them were like, you want to profile me? for a book? Like, why? But I think everyone was super excited to be able to tell their stories. And I'm so grateful because really the book is about them. It's not about me, it's about them. And they were so generous with their experiences and being vulnerable. And I think it's such a great book because of that.
No, I think it's amazing because, as you said, the stories are also different, the experiences are also different, the styles are also different, but there is this really common narrative that within kind of this dominant idea of fashion, these are stories that haven't been at the center, that
Mhm.
haven't been celebrated, and I think this book is taking them and really celebrating them for the world and for others to see themselves in them.
Mhm.
So you're at the heart in many ways of the fashion industry as a writer for Vogue in New York. Um, and I think this book really represents this exciting change that's happening in fashion, where we're seeing this movement towards much more inclusion, equity, and social justice. And I'm wondering, based on your experience, if you're seeing this change in your work and what you think is propelling some of this change.
Yes. I mean, I feel like the biggest buzzword in fashion right now is inclusivity and diversity. Like every brand, every magazine, every show is talking about this. And it's really kind of a new thing, which is kind of sad, but great also that it's happening. But it really has only happened, I would say, in the past year. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement, when it reached its height last summer, really forced people to make a change and to think about how they could address more voices and just be a little more diverse in their approach to fashion. And it's kind of crazy that it's only happened this year, but I'm really grateful that it is happening. People always ask me, like, do you think it's enough? No. I think it's like the turning point where we're thinking, but we could be doing a lot more. But I have seen a lot of great progress. Like even my work at Vogue, like no matter what we're pitching, what package we're working on, we're always thinking like, how can we have more voices in this? And that's not something that's been part of the pitch process, I would say 5 years ago. You know what I mean? And so I'm really seeing this turn where people are actively, myself included, thinking how we can be better. And so I think it's great, but not perfect yet. We'll say that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think there's so much happening now that we've never seen before. And I think there's certainly the critique. It's not enough and it isn't. But I think this representation really matters because I think when
Mhm.
you've never seen yourself represented, right? Like
Yeah.
that is meaningful and that's, a really important step. Um, where do you see the conversation going? What do you think is still needed for this push for greater inclusion in a holistic way?
Mm. I think it needs to now just be an organic part of your everyday, no matter what industry you're in. Like right now, I feel like sometimes it's either forced or maybe performative sometimes when you're trying to be diverse. And maybe that's not a bad thing because at least you're doing something. But I think we need to get to a point where it's just something you do. Like it's not something you're trying to do, you just do it. And I think that needs to happen in a lot of different sectors. I don't know how, like, if you're a designer, you need to be thinking about your own design staff and who's on it. Can that be more diverse? If you're a writer, think about your schedule for the week. Is one of those a marginalized community? No, then it probably should be. Like, just really easy, but putting it to action.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a worldview, right? It's a paradigm in terms of how you go about everyday life, how you make creative and business hiring. Every kind of decision is through that lens.
Yeah.
And I think this book is part of that. I think it's playing a really important role of centering stories and experiences and narratives of fashion and beauty that haven't been centered and helping expand worldviews. So
Mhm.
those types of questions become part of that everyday.
Yes, exactly.
Um, so, in the conclusion of the book, I love that you ask your readers to consider how they're going to use fashion and style to express their story. And I love that you turn it to them to really think inward. Now, obviously, as one of your followers on Instagram, I see obviously you have this really rad, incredible style. And
Thank you.
I want to turn the question to you. How do you use fashion and beauty in your life to express your story?
Well, it's a new thing for me too to think about fashion this way, to be honest. I think about like 5 years ago, I didn't think I owned one Indigenous brand in my closet. And I'm Indigenous, like how horrible. So lately, I've been really seeing an opportunity to wear Indigenous brands because A, you're supporting artists and fostering a community that way. But B, like I see the power of walking down the street in something like this Jamie Okuma top, and maybe, one person likes it. I don't care. But they'll ask me about it, say, where'd you get that? That's an opportunity to inform people, educate them. Actually, this is a really cool native streetwear brand, which is a thing, by the way, and you should check them out. I really see like it's such a small thing, but what you wear can really educate others and like introduce them to new things. So for me, like I've really started really trying to wear a lot of Indigenous, almost mostly, because for so long I shied away from my culture and didn't want to wear anything traditional. But now I'm trying to embrace both contemporary labels and traditional. I just got a ribbon shirt made last summer, which I love, and it's in my book. So I think that's how I'm going to approach style from now on. To me,
I love the idea that the clothes we wear every day can be like these education tools to create dialogues that we might not have otherwise, but start to not just expose other people to these really incredible designers they may not have heard of, but really expand people's ideas around fashion.
yes.
Do you have any?
Oh, sorry. But like,
No, go
that's
ahead.
the power of, style, not to like be cheesy and call it my title, but, its fashion is so visual and it really grabs your eye and it is based on aesthetics. So, when you wear something really gorgeous, it invites people to, want to learn about it or to ask about it. That's the beauty of fashion. So why not use that for a bigger purpose, I think.
And I think that that's so powerful because in some ways it's something that we can all do in everyday life, right? We don't have to work in fashion to kind of be part of this education. It's just in our own circles, in our own life, what we choose to wear can start a dialogue in our community.
Yeah.
And that can be so transformative.
Yes, that's the beauty.
I love that. One of the things that's really exciting about this book is that it's for a young adult audience. And as you were writing it, and now that you see it sort of published and out, what work do you hope this book will do in the world, particularly for this young audience? What are you hoping it'll do for them?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think it was so important for me to do it from a younger audience perspective. I think all ages can learn from this, of course. I learned a lot, but the young audiences are like sponges. What they read when they're young or what they see is what they'll, first impressions matter. And it's also, I think about when I was young, I didn't read anything of this nature. And if I had, maybe I would have thought my culture was cool and I would have asked to have a ribbon shirt and I would have gone to powwows. But I didn't. What I saw in fashion was mostly white centric or luxury. And so I thought that's what I needed to aspire to. And I just don't think that's cool or the truth. So I'm hoping that kids read this, whether they're from a cultural background or not, and just feel empowered to just be themselves, like wear what you want to wear, be proud of who you are. Don't feel pressured to wear something just because your friends are wearing it, which I totally did. Embrace who you are. And I think the younger generation now is a little better about that, I will say. They're a little more in tune with that, but not everyone. So I hope they read that and feel empowered.
Yeah, I think it's so important and I think it's so exciting because I think of these, not just these worldviews are affirmed when someone is young, but when they're exposed to it, the possibilities as they grow up with how they live in the world, how they engage with others, how they think about people who are different from them in addition to their own culture is going to be just so profound and so powerful. And yeah, that's really exciting. And I think
and empathizing with other people's stories and sort of understanding their shared experiences. Yeah, I hope they, totally get that from this.
I'm going to transition now to some audience questions that have come up.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, there's so many great ones. Okay, one of them is intersectionality is a critical piece that people often overlook. Did you address it in the stories that you tell in your book?
Oh, what do you mean by intersectionality?
So I think my understanding is the idea that identity isn't sort of a single category. So we're not just, say, Indigenous, but then it could be Indigenous and also disabled, or Indigenous and also plus size or fat identified. So the way our kind of multiple identities overlap and intersect.
Oh yeah, no, that was a big thing in the book. Like I think of the chapter on modest fashion, for example. I profiled this. She's like a model author. Her name's Leah V. And she, wears hijabs, turbans, but she has also really fabulous fashion. She's kind of like this enigma of a person. She's so fabulous. But she was, she really informed me in that, she's Black and Muslim. And even being that has its own hurdles. A lot of Muslim or modest fashion brands often exclude Black people. I didn't know that was a thing. I learned that. And so there's like all these little moments where, I was like, oh, I just heard about that in the hair chapter, but now we're talking about that in the modest fashion chapter. Yeah, it's exactly that. Identity is not insular. There's a lot of shared experiences. And I didn't know that would be a thing going into this. I really didn't. So it was kind of enlightening to hear those.
Yeah, I think, and that definitely really comes out in the stories you tell, just the way our identities are so layered and textured and overlapping, and the ways fashion really plays into that. And, within certain identity groups, there's so many identities and so many groups, and fashion, can really play a role to exclude or empower. And you discuss that so beautifully.
Thank you.
What is the best way that allies can support culture and fashion? So, for example, misappropriation, or obviously has been this questioner asks, is obviously a big example. So what's the role of allyship when it comes to engaging with fashion, and particularly around cultures that you may not be part of?
I love that question. I mean, there's so many examples, but if I think about Native fashion, just as an example, a lot of people always ask me, can I wear Indigenous fashion if I'm not part of that community? The answer is yes. I mean, but you need to do your research. So, know what you're buying, because obviously if you're buying something that has a ceremonial purpose or is, sacred, that's not for you. You can't wear that. But, if an Indigenous brand is selling streetwear or ready to wear, something just more fashion based, they're selling it because they want to sell it. Anyone can wear it. And by supporting them, you're allowing an authentic artist to do what they do. And so, yes, you can definitely wear, and you should wear pieces by other cultures. It's just doing that little bit of homework to understand what you're buying and making sure that it's, not offensive or, but for most of the times, I think go for it.
I think that's such good advice, and that's such a great framework for people to think about. Like, if it's not spiritual or sacred, if it's by an artist from that culture, and this is their artistry and their business. This is the necklace I'm wearing from Indigenous beadwork artist Teresa Stevenson. And again, this is what she does, and her work is incredible. And this is a way to really wear something I love and I feel great, and to support her, and to do everything. So I think that that's such a wonderful way to think about it.
Yes. And then again, people ask about what you're wearing, and then you're kind of promoting their work. Like, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Shout out to Teresa Stevenson. Always. This is so beautiful.
I'm jealous.
I guess in your experience, here's another question. Do you feel designers are turning their minds to designing for accessibility for people with disabilities? So I guess as we talk about sort of this movement towards inclusion, what kinds of changes have you seen around access and disability?
It's a good question. I don't think mainstream brands or big fashion houses are doing enough in that way, unfortunately. I can't say in the past few years I've seen a lot of that, which is not great. But I will say there are a lot of really cool adaptive fashion labels coming out, more than ever, who are, making sure they're designing for disabilities, but also just making it cool and like unique. And that was something that hasn't really existed before. So I will say there's a lot more options, which is great. But it's usually from people who have a connection to that. There needs to be more brands who also don't have a connection to that, but are incorporating that. So that's where the work still needs to be done, I think. It can't just be up to disabled people to do these things. Like there needs to be a bigger support from the industry. So it's happening, but not quick enough yet.
No, thanks for that take. And I think this is when there's obviously been so many opportunities for collaboration. So brands that obviously have incredible resources and systems in place, like what are the ways to create pathways for disabled people to join as designers, to have that knowledge, to really continue to build inclusion. I mean, so many of the ways you talked about, Christian, of where this movement into inclusion still needs to go.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting to think about that.
Yeah, totally.
Another question, how is it working for a major fashion magazine such as Vogue that's predominantly white as an Indigenous person?
Well, Vogue is not predominantly white, I will say that. Our team is actually incredibly diverse now. There's probably one from each culture you can think of, someone, who can speak to that. So it's actually a very diverse team. But I will say is that for a long time, there was really no Indigenous representation. And I think there might be one other Indigenous, but I'm like one of the few. So that's been interesting because it's been a lot of firsts. And with that, I can feel a little bit of pressure at times because I want to do it right. And it is such a big platform. And I'm like, I'm still learning about a lot of things. I'm not an expert in the world, you know what I mean? So, but I think it's been such a joy to, work there and have a big audience and be able to share these stories that no one else is telling. So it's been amazing, like total dream job, I think.
And I think it's so cool because then you and your colleagues bring this really important lived experience to those roles. And then we can imagine how that will then, as you continue, open up doors and pathways for so many more.
Yeah.
So, right, it's not just one person from every kind of culture, but then there's like a plethora. And I think that becomes really exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
We have time for one last question. And the question is, what can we expect to see from Christian Allaire in the next 5 years?
Oh.
Perhaps another book where, people are interested in sort of what's next for you. What can they expect to see?
Wow, I'm definitely going to be sleeping for 5 days straight now that the book's out. I need a little bit of a rest, but long term, definitely continuing my work at Vogue. I think there's so many more stories to be told, never short on story ideas. So keep doing that. Maybe another book. This was such a joy and I've definitely gotten some interest for another. So, I would be down to do a power style round 2. But we'll see,
Well, from all of the excitement and enthusiasm and all of these questions, I think that there's a readership that can't wait for number 2. So definitely keep that there. And Christian, I just want to thank you. So much of the work I know that we do at Ryerson is really to challenge this definition of fashion, that it was born in Europe and it exists just for one group of people, to recognize it's existed on this land since time immemorial. And that is the work you're doing. Those are the stories you're sharing, and you are infinitely expanding the definition of fashion and celebrating everyone who's doing it. So thank you for modeling this, for this incredible book that is going to do such great things in the world.
Well, miigwech. Thank you for having me. Love my Ryerson peeps. Happy to be here.
I want to thank you both. This has been such a treat to be a fly on the wall between this conversation for the last half hour. And it has been fascinating. It has been insightful. It has been exciting. And I love that we all have homework from this discussion, that we can take a little bit of ownership and a little bit of pride in our fashion, in our style, and explore other cultures and explore and reflect that. And I want to be stopped on the street at some point and have someone ask me who I'm wearing. But just a fantastic, fantastic talk. And I want to thank you both so much for bringing your enthusiasm and your passion to Ryerson and to the alumni. Thank you to the audience for being here today too. I really appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your day to join us and hear what your fellow alumni are up to. We can look for an email from us. We will share a link with this recording so that you can share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. And we'll let you know about more book talks coming up. If you've got an idea, please reach out to us, but we want to bring Ryerson to you as well. So thank you both. Have a wonderful afternoon and have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.